Okay, I thought I'd do another update video here to show that the shay that I was working on in the last update has been finished. Here's the other side of it. It's sitting over here in Landisburg, so might as well show the other side, as we'd call it, the one without the drive on it. I'll show some other videos while I'm talking about this here, but this took a little while to finish. I had a couple things that I hadn't done in a while since completing another shay, and I kind of forgot how to do them. Building this shay just took a little longer because I don't have a whole lot of time, but I'll show you some of the things that I'm testing on this one. One of the things is I'm testing the 3D printed wheels. The tires, as they call them, the metal part of the wheels, I actually developed in CAD and sent those to a machine shop, and those were turned on the CNC lathe. And the centers of the wheels were 3D printed with Frozen's RPG resin. And the only reason why I tried that is I noticed it had a little bit different properties. It felt a little stronger, and it didn't really make a wear mark on it when I ran the gears. Originally, the gears I printed were just a test fit to have them cast, but they seem to kind of work. And so I put them in this shay, and we're going to use it a lot and see how they hold up. You know, if they hold up, I don't know why I wouldn't want to just stick with 3D printed wheels. They do solve one problem that was a little bit of a struggle with the brass centered wheels, and that was insulating the wheels from each other, because I do use a brass axle. And obviously if you have brass wheels on both sides on a brass axle, one side has to be insulated, and the insulating part of it was the tough part. So these solve that. Another new feature on this one that I'm trying is the railings here are 3D printed. And I printed these also with RPG resin, and what I do is I don't post cure them, so they come off the printer kind of soft like this. You can see how that one's kind of flexible, and I just paint them. And so there's one here, there's one here. The railings down the side here on both sides are the same way. The railings on the end here, same thing. And also the footboards are also printed. Normally on all the other ones, even the 3D printed ones, I used brass bar stock here to make these attachment, whatever you want to call them, brackets, and then I use real wood footboards. But I wanted to try this out to see how these would hold up, because if it derails or hits those, you know, those are easy to break off. You can see they're very thin. So this is going to be a good test engine. I'm going to use this one a lot for a while and just try to see if it breaks. Another thing I've been working on are my log cars. And you can see these first three here. These are new cars, and these are some of the older cars. And the older cars had a couple problems that came up. One of them is that the space between these center frame members here, even though this is to scale, it was a hair too wide, and I had one corner that the flanges would hit the sides of these, and the wheels, of course, you know, the trucks would derail. And so what I did on the new ones is I just moved them in 20 thousandths of an inch narrower, and that solved the problem. You don't really notice the 20 thousandths, obviously. It's pretty small. It's like 2 inches. And so now they don't rub tight here. The other thing I did is I changed the truck design a little bit, which makes them way easier to assemble. I also changed the axles, and I'll show you the axles here in a minute. They're pretty cool. So now I can build these faster. One of the biggest things I changed was the coupler box. These back here, I was using HOKD number 5 centering springs that I modified. But the trouble with them is that the couplers didn't have enough side swing. You can see here they barely swing side to side. And since I like to do a lot of offset coupling, which is where you offset the couplers and shove them back into sidings, I couldn't do that one-handed with these. And even if I could use two hands, I couldn't get them quite far enough apart. The new ones, the boxes are designed to have a little wider opening inside on the end so the coupler can pivot just a little bit farther. And the other thing is I came up with a way to make a really soft centering spring that works just phenomenal. I'm really happy with this centering spring. And there is no, you can see if I pull it by the couplers, there isn't that spring that's inside of there that's longitudinal, that causes that coupler to come out and makes these things bounce like a pogo stick. So that modification I can't do to the original ones. Even if I wanted to keep these, I can't do it. So I'm just building all new ones, and along the way I'm kind of trying to get the painting down a little bit better so it doesn't take quite as long. These still need a wash over them. These have a wash to kind of tie all the colors in. These I still have to do the wash on them, but I'm a lot happier with these cars. So I got to basically rebuild all of my log cars. I only had 8, so I've got 5 more to go. Here you can see the bottom of some of the log cars that I'm putting the steel rods inside of these frame members here. And I've kind of come up with a better way to put these in also. What I do is I actually dip the rods in matte medium, and I kind of just shake them off a little bit inside this bottle, and then I just set them in these channels in here and let them dry, and that's worked out a lot better for putting these rods in here. These rods add weight to the car, and they also keep it from sagging. It keeps them nice and straight. Then what I've been doing is I've been filling these pockets here with some of this low melt metal. I just actually drip it and pour it inside of those things, and then when it hardens back up, it just takes a couple minutes. I put covers on the bottom of these that I had 3D printed, and those covers have bearing blocks on them that ride on top of the trucks. So I've really kind of honed in on these things and perfected these now, and I like these new ones a lot better. The holes in the bunks for the sway poles are more accurate, and so they're just a better car all around. So here's the other major change to the log cars, and that was the axles. If you saw, I posted a video on how I was making axles to convert the KD ON30 24-inch rib back wheels into ON3. And I was using those with a brass tube that had paper wrapped on one end. Now what I'm doing is I have these 3D printed axles, and they have a hole in the center of them, which is a 16th inch diameter hole. And what I do is I cut a piece of brass tube to go in the center, and that gives them the strength. And that also is what acts as, basically the bearing inside the truck. And then I just pull the wheels off the ON30 axles, and they just push on top of these, and I push them up to these seats that you see here, and that automatically gauges them perfectly engaged. So this has really sped up making trucks for me. Before making wheels, it just took forever. And now I can make a set of trucks really fast. I just cut a piece of brass tube, slide it through there, pull the axles off, push these on, and paint them. Over here in Sewell, down at the interchange, I've been working very slowly on the structures, and you can see that the lumber office now has roofing material on it. I've done some more weathering on the boards on the outside, and it's pretty close to getting done. I still have to put a chimney basically on it, or a stovepipe somewhere that doesn't show up in the pictures at all, but I'm sure that there must have been a stove in there for winter, for working in the winter time. So I just have to figure out where I think it would be logical and how I would think it would come out through the building. I'm thinking, somewhere basically in the middle here. I would assume a structure like this was all open inside, and the stove was probably right in the middle of the room. So I imagine that stovepipe kind of came up and went out somewhere right here. What you see missing here is the freight house, basically over there. That's on the workbench right now, getting covered with wood, and hopefully that one will be a painted structure. So I did stain it the same wood here, but I will put a chipping fluid on that, paint it, and then pull that some of that paint off to make it look like it's chipped up. And then next I'll do the company store here. I'm doing that so that I can start scenery in back here. I still have a goal to get scenery started sometime before the end of the year, and I want to start in this end and work my way all the way over to the dump trestle. This structure is finished here, so I can tie that in. This one's almost finished here. I just have to do the roofing and that little cupola up there and put the doors on it. I'm going to weather this more. This has got to look a lot worse than it does now. But I want to get that one done and just keep working my way over here. I'll finish that structure too. and then move on. A goal here is to get the whole dump trestle done with the other chute down here and get all the scenery in there. As you can see here, I've got some of the framework done for the shed that's going to go over the dump bin for the coal tipple. There's also going to be one down here in the bin that goes to the coke crusher. And what I've done here is I have to build this framework first here. And if you know the Mans Creek, they cut a hole in the side of the building here. Basically, they probably just ripped the boards out. And that made a sag right here. You can see it in the pictures, and if you have the Mans Creek book. And so what I did here is I basically framed up this back wall solid here with a framing, like a post frame type building. And then the front side, I left these out, and I actually snapped this board along in a few places here, kind of bent the sag in here, and then I just put some glue back in the joints, some ACC, and let it harden in there. And you can't see it in there. And then I started putting trusses where the roof is still straight and on this end. And then when I get now to the middle here where the sag is, I'm gonna have to build these in place to make these boards tip down right there. I also had to stop here because I have to put in the air duct system right here. It still needs to be painted, but what this does is it's gonna go up in the rafters up there, and then this air delivery pipe, so that's bent with soft brass tubing, so it's real easy to bend. When the air duct is installed, it'll sit somewhere right about here inside the structure, and that tube will go down alongside of that trestle bent right there. Once that's all painted black, you won't really see it, especially since there'll be the truck bridge going across right here. And it should be enough to hide the fact that it's going down along that bent. The trusses that you can see on here, I pre-build those things in this little jig that I 3D printed. Now this is printed on a FDM printer. I could do it on a resin printer, but it's just really fast and cheap on an FDM printer. It takes about 20 minutes to print one of these things. And what you see here is there's two jigs right here. These are for cutting the boards. So I'll just slide the board in here till it hits that stop, slice it off at this angle right here, and then I use a razor blade in these grooves right here to cut the little notch that you see right there. That little notch is what you can see kind of goes over that top board there and kind of keeps that top in place. And then there's a gluing jig in there that puts those pieces. Oh, this one here cuts the one in the middle right here to the right angles. And then those three boards get stuck in this gluing jig. And what you see here in this jig, these slots right here, they are underneath every glue joint. And I use ACC. I know a lot of people who work in wood like to use like a Elmer's glue or a white glue or a wood glue, the yellow glue. I don't use any of that stuff. On everything I've ever built, I use thick ACC, the gel ACC. And what I'll do is I'll put it on the ends of the boards and then stick them in here. And then if any of it does ooze out, it just oozes into that little space there. And then I just wipe it off the backside. So I pre-stain all my wood and I just put the gel on the ends, stick it together. And then usually what I do is as I shoot some of the accelerator on the workbench somewhere, and I just rub my finger on it and I just touch the joint and it instantly dries, and then I can pop it out of the jig. And that way I can just keep building trusses as fast as I need them. So I know that I said I've been making these trusses for the dump shed, but in actuality, they would have not been trusses. It's just easier for me to build them as trusses, and then I can put them in there one at a time and get the air duct fished inside of there. And then I'll put a piece of wood between each one of them that kind of represents the ridge pole. I think it's called a ridge pole. But anyways, what'll happen is I'll put wood blocking down between each one of the top trusses here, so they look like they were built as regular rafters. It's just, you're not really going to see it once this piece of air duct is put inside of there. Now the air duct, in case you haven't seen, is what this does is this blows down the residual coal left inside of the hopper cars after they've been dumped. What'll happen is I'll actually end up bending these to look more like an air nozzle. I just do that by pinching the ends down. And then that tube that I talked about right there will hook up to a solenoid valve that'll be controlled by this button right here, and then you'll be able to push that and it'll put a little blast of air down inside the hopper car to blow out the coal. And what I hope will also happen is it'll blow some of the coal out that sits on top of the ties in there. This is actually that freight house that goes down to Sewell. You can see I started covering the 3D printed inner walls. These are also on an FDM printer. And I cover these with individual boards, and then I make individual bats for those. And then they're all glued on with ACC, the thick stuff. And I can work as fast as I can put the boards down. I can keep working. I don't need to wait for any glue to dry. These are all individually stained, and I do this because I just like the look of individual wood. When you buy the milled, siding material, it has grain in the entire board, and what I've noticed is that you can sometimes see the line follow down through the sides of the buildings, and I just don't like that look personally. If you're going to paint it all one solid color, not weather it, that's a great time saver. But I like this because I'm going to put chipping fluid on here, and when the paint comes off, you'll see all these different colors. The other thing I like to do is I like to have some seams in some of these things here. And I also like the fact that because I'm building it, it has minor imperfections, and I think that really adds to the realistic look of the structure. Not every groove is exactly the same, and not every bat is exactly straight. Another thing that I can do is I can make some of them stop short. I can break them off if I want to. It's easier using individual boards to make the openings around the windows. I actually just put the window piece in there, and then I just run the bat tight up to it. I don't have to trim and get around all that stuff. And it also doesn't sit up on top. I think it's incorrect to have the window on top of the bats. The window would be put in there, and these would be run down to the molding. Now I am using 3D printed windows in all my structures for the ones that are kind of general structures. When I get to the ones that I really want to do a unique job on, like maybe the car shop, I'll probably build those all with individual boards. So here you can see one of the walls of that freight house is getting the boards put on it. And for the windows, I just get close enough, and then I'll cut them out around there when I get all the boards in there. And then I'll put the bats on there. As I prepare to do scenery, I've been kind of playing around with some rock molds here. Back in, I think it was 2018, when the narrow gauge convention was here in Minnesota, I stopped by the Bragdon booth and bought just a ton of rock molds from him that I thought would look good on the layout I was planning on building at the time, which was a fictional railroad based off of the Mans Creek. And now that I'm actually trying to model the Mans Creek more prototypically, I have to look a little bit carefully at the rocks. And the last trip I made down on the walking the main line, I took a lot of pictures of the rocks and just kind of studied them. And I'm afraid that I think the Bragdon molds overall won't work for me. I did cast every single one I bought, and I've been just looking at the patterns on them, and I think this one might work here, so that's why I have it kind of sitting here to see how it's going to fit in here. But I think overall I'm not going to be able to use them, so I'm not sure really what I'm going to do. Over here, I started hand carving some foam rocks, and they might be closer to looking like what's down in the Mans Creek gorge there. And if they turn out good, I may have to do more of that. I think in some areas I can use these where, there's some questionable stuff here. Like there's no area in the Mans Creek like this, but limitations of a model railroad, I had to do this. But down there in what's going to be kind of the what they call the wet or drywall trestle area, they have a pretty distinct look that shows up in pictures, and so I kind of want to capture the look of those rocks, and I don't know if I can do those with the Bragdon ones. Maybe as it comes up in these corners here, I can use some of them. I'm just going to kind of see how that goes when I get to it. I don't know if that's going to be This year I'll get the rocks in there. I'm trying to get all the rocks in, even if I don't do the scenery around them. I kind of want to finish up some of that and get this all in at least that tan paint. I'm kind of tired of the pink and the white. If you follow my Facebook page on the Mans Creek, it's called Mans Creek in ON3. I posted a couple weeks ago that because I don't have time to work on the layout and I'm not really doing update videos that much, that I would maybe do a video on questions and answers. You ask a question and I answer it, because I think maybe over time I forgot a few things that I talked about, or maybe I wasn't clear on something and you have a question. I do get questions in the comments. I do get questions on Facebook, and sometimes those are just harder to answer with text than it would be for me just to show it in a video. I could probably spend hours typing out things when I could spend just minutes talking about them. So if you have something that you would like to know about, post it in the comments. I know people have posted before. I'm going to start making some videos on answering those questions. One of them specifically was on operations. Some of them are on theory, but ask anything. If I forgot something or you want to see more of something, go ahead and post it and I'll put it in the next video. And as usual, thanks for watching these videos, and we'll see you next time.